For 2022, the Lexus NX starts a little bit more expensive than it did in the last generation, $39,025 for the front-wheel drive base model with the naturally aspirated four-cylinder engine, $40,625 if you want to add all-wheel drive to that model. The NX 350 Turbo is $42,625, and the hybrid sort of splits the difference between the base all-wheel drive version and the turbo all-wheel drive model at $42,125. As far as I'm concerned, the hybrid version is an absolute no-brainer. Even versus the base front-wheel drive model, it's going to give you a payoff in under 4 years. If you're going to lease your NX and you're simply worried about the absolute least expensive model, that could be the front-wheel drive NX. But if you look at the all-wheel drive base model, you're actually going to end up saving money within that lease period if you choose the hybrid model. I'm not entirely sure why the Lexus version of this engine recommends premium unleaded, whereas the same power output in the Highlander hybrid does not. That is just left to Lexus and exactly what they decided to do for marketing, etc. But know that it will operate just fine on regular unleaded. And if you do that, you will save money immediately versus the turbo model and in about 4 years for the regular model. Now let's dive into comparisons. The first competitor has to be the Acura RDX. The RDX is excellent value also. It starts a little bit less expensive depending on exactly how you want to configure it, bearing in mind that the turbocharged engine is standard. So $40,600 base is a little bit more expensive than the base version of the Lexus NX, but we get a much more powerful engine, 272 horsepower standard in that model. If you want all-wheel drive, that's $42,800, so only about $2,000 more than the absolute base version of the NX, but you get a lot of power, 10-speed automatic transmission, and a torque vectoring rear differential. The torque vectoring ability of the RDX really defines the personality of this model if you choose the all-wheel drive option. If you choose front-wheel drive, there's not really much difference between the NX and the RDX, but if you choose all-wheel drive, the RDX is definitely more fun. And the 10-speed automatic transmission is very aggressive. It has a super low first gear, so launches in that vehicle feel very, very aggressive, and the 0 to 60 time definitely is impressive. The RDX is also a little bit bigger. It's about 3 inches longer on the outside. That gives it about 2 inches more legroom on the inside. You'll really notice that in the back seat. And a cargo area that's about 25% larger. Styling on both of these models is a little bit controversial. I think that I prefer the exterior look of the RDX, but I prefer the interior of the Lexus NX. The dashboard in the RDX just comes across a little bit too discordant for me. I'm not the biggest fan of the modern center stack that we find in a lot of modern Acuras, and the push-button shifter, not exactly my cup of tea. Also, the Acura infotainment system does not have a touchscreen. It has their little touchpad controller, and that's something that Lexus has realized was a bad idea, and they've moved back to a touchscreen. So even though I like the software interface and look a bit better in the Acura, functionality-wise, it's definitely better in the Lexus because they finally kicked that controller to the curb. The connected nature of the Lexus infotainment system is interesting. They're promising that not only are features going to be cloud-based so they're always up to date, but they're also promising over-the-air updates for the software on the vehicle itself to help keep it current. Exactly how that will look over time we don't know yet, but we do know that subscriptions will be required after the trial period ends. The trial period length will depend on the model of Lexus you're looking at and the screen size in the Lexus. So if you get the bigger screen in most Lexuses, it's going to be a 3-year subscription that will cover you through the term of a lease, for instance. If you get the smaller screens, often it's going to be a 1-year trial. At the moment, neither BMW nor Mercedes offer a hybrid or a plug-in hybrid compact crossover in the US. It appears that these manufacturers are really going to be pushing for full electrification rather than bringing their plug-in hybrids to the US for 2022 or 2023. Let's just talk about the Mercedes GLC because at the moment it is slightly better selling than the X3. It starts at $43,850 and it's obviously a direct competitor to the regular NX. It comes with a turbocharged engine standard, but not as much standard equipment as we find in the Lexus, especially when it comes to driver assistance systems like adaptive cruise control, their lane centering systems, all that sort of stuff. Most of those systems tend to be optional in the Mercedes lineup, whereas most of that is standard in the Lexus lineup. In terms of driving dynamics, Mercedes has the clear win here. It's definitely a more balanced chassis, it's more fun to drive, it handles better than the Lexus, etc. On the downside, it's not going to be as efficient, obviously, as the hybrid version. It's also going to cost more to maintain and keep over the long term. So if you're looking for a compact luxury crossover and you want to buy it rather than lease it, my recommendation would be get the Lexus. If you're looking for the more configurable vehicle, the one that has more options, more gadgets, more gizmos available, more customization available, that's going to be the Mercedes. There are a decent number of different interior trim options, color options, exterior color options, etc. Ton of different standalone options and packages available with the Mercedes. But if you get carried away with those options, you could definitely get your GLC up to $10,000, $15,000 more than a Lexus NX quite easily. Long-term operational costs are going to be significantly lower in the NX Hybrid than any of the German alternatives, not just because of fuel costs, but also because of long-term maintenance costs as well. Now, the only other hybrid that we find in this segment from Germany is the Audi Q5, but it's a plug-in hybrid, so in some ways, it's actually a little bit more of a competitor to the NX 450, not the 350, but let's talk about it anyway. It's definitely more expensive than the regular hybrid version of the NX. It starts at $55,400. Of course, it does qualify for a tax credit. Now, the one thing to keep in mind is that if you're leasing your luxury vehicle, you don't get the tax credit. The leasing company gets the tax credit, and they may or may not apply that to your lease in terms of reduced cap cost. As a result of that and the higher price, you're unlikely to really break even with the Audi Q5, but it does offer an EV range. You can go 23 miles on a charge. After that, you'll get 26 miles per gallon, so significantly lower than we find in the Lexus NX, but acceleration is definitely better. 0 to 60 in 5 seconds. It is significantly faster than the NX Hybrid, and it has a reasonably sized battery at 17.9 kilowatt hours. Winter weather traction is definitely better in the Audi Q5 because it has a mechanical all-wheel drive system. So if you live in an area that routinely gets lots of snow, ice, slippery conditions, etc., you might prefer the feel of the Audi. The NX is relatively capable, but the feel is very, very different, and that's because it does not have a large battery pack like we find in the Q5 or the Volvo XC60, which we'll talk about in a moment. The result is that in order to generate enough power to deliver maximum power to the rear electric motor, the front wheels have to be spinning relatively rapidly. In a situation where the front tires have low or no traction in the NX Hybrid, you're going to have to dig deeper into the throttle than you would in a turbo NX to get power to go to the rear axle, because the engine has to be spinning at a high enough speed to generate enough power to send that to the rear wheels, and in that process, the front wheels are spinning at the same time. The plug-in hybrid Q5, on the other hand, would feel just like a regular Q5 in that situation because it has the exact same all-wheel drive system. Next up, we have one of my long-term favorites in this segment, the Volvo XC60 Recharge. For a mid-year refresh in 2022, it has received very significant changes. It has a new engine, new electric motors, and a new battery. Also, new infotainment systems and a few other interior tweaks. The result is that the XC60 plug-in hybrid gets longer range, better fuel economy, and significantly better performance. The system now totals 455 horsepower thanks to the bigger battery pack and a bigger electric motor in the rear. Out on the road, you are definitely going to notice the bigger electric motor in the back. The XC60 was always a little bit tail-happy at times. It has kind of an odd balance of torque steer and oversteer depending on exactly what you're doing with it, something that we do not see in the regular Lexus Hybrid or even the Lexus plug-in hybrid because of the size of the electric motor that they put in the rear. And Volvo has chosen a much torqueier, much larger electric motor in the back that at times can actually send more power to the rear axle than the front axle. And of course, when you're driving the XC60 along in electric-only mode, it's actually a rear-wheel drive vehicle. When it's operating as a gasoline-only vehicle, it's going to be a front-wheel drive vehicle. But thanks to the bigger battery pack and the large motor generator unit up front, it can also operate as an all-wheel drive vehicle, and there are more dedicated modes in there than we find in the Lexus lineup. So you can command the vehicle to balance power 50-50 front and rear. That's possible because of the bigger electric motor and, of course, the bigger battery pack as well. Then once you're commanding over about 300 horsepower or so, then it's going to gradually start biasing that power towards the front until the front axle is producing about 300 horsepower and about 150 horsepower in the back. That combination is good for 36 miles of electric range, 28 miles per gallon once the battery has been depleted, and a 0 to 60 time of decently under 4.5 seconds. The downside, of course, is that even after the tax credit, it's going to be about $4,000 more than the regular NX Hybrid. Now, on the other hand, if you're looking for a plug-in hybrid in this segment, the NX Hybrid, it's really hard to find right now. Lexus is not building too many of them, and Volvo is really pushing hard towards their electrification goals, so they've got a ton of plug-in hybrids around, and it seems to be a little bit easier to get your hands on the XC60 plug-in hybrid right now than even the regular Lexus NX Hybrid. Now keep in mind that you will find a bit more standard equipment in the NX Hybrid than you will in the Volvo XC60 plug-in hybrid, even though the Volvo is going to be a little bit more expensive. On the other hand, I do find the interior of the Volvo more comfortable, and I think the design is just more pleasing to my eye as well, both the exterior design and the interior design. The Volvo is also a bit roomier than the Lexus. Lexus's latest platforms have tend to shrunk the interior a little bit, and we certainly see that in the NX. The exterior size of the Lexus is pretty close to a number of key competitors in this segment, but we find a little bit less legroom than a reasonable number of them. So if you plan on putting child seats or taller adults in the back of your luxury crossover, you might want to look at something a bit roomier. On the other hand, if you're looking to buy one of these vehicles and keep it long term, your money probably should go to Lexus because the NX Hybrid is likely going to be the most reliable option in this segment. Lexus's hybrid systems tend to be the most reliable option in the lineup, and Lexus tends to be the most reliable luxury brand in the US, so that combination really directs you to NX Hybrid if you want long-term reliability. And of course, long-term operational costs are likely going to be lower in that Lexus as well. Theoretically, in the plug-in hybrid Q5 or the plug-in hybrid Volvo, you theoretically could end up saving money at some point in time if you were able to do all of your driving in electric-only mode, but then there are going to be the other long-term maintenance costs that are likely going to come with owning an Audi or a Volvo. If my money were on the line, I probably would lean towards the Volvo, to be perfectly honest, because I love the design, it's more comfortable, it handles better, it's definitely much, much faster than the Lexus. But then there is that operational cost question. If you're not quite ready for the level of commitment involved in owning a luxury car from a European brand, however, then you would do well to stick with the Lexus. It's likely also going to be more reliable than the Acura RDX. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section. And of course, check out all the related videos on the channel. If you haven't already done so, find me over at Facebook.com, Instagram, all those other social places. And I'll see all of you next week.